CM 365, all about Carnatic music. Today we'll be discussing another very important aspect of Thalam, which is the Layam. We are all very familiar with the saying Shrutir Mata Laya Pita, which means that the Shruti is the mother and Laya is the father. So thus for music, both the Shruti and the Layam are very important for its formation itself. Now what is Layam? Layam is the interval of time between the beats and movements in time, and it stands for rhythm associated with tempo. Tempo and rhythm, we could say, are interrelated, and they are quite inseparable also. In Layam, we see that there are different tempos associated. We have the slow, medium, and fast, which are technically called as the Vilamba, Madhya, and Durita Laya. Layam is a fundamental factor of music, and even when we talk about Nadam, we see that it is created by periodic vibration of sound waves. Now, the frequency or the periodic kind of vibration is actually very, very important here, because when it becomes non-periodic, the vibration actually, then that is no more what we call as nadam. It turns out to become noise. So this periodic vibration, whether it is melody or in rhythm, for both we see that that is very, very important. And thus we could also say that here as an extension of this, that nadam itself is laya based. And just as sounds too close in pitch cannot be distinguished, like that we could also say that when the beats come too fast, one after the other, they cannot be perceived as different. So there should be a certain kind of a gap or a basic kind of an interval for us to comprehend, to be able to comprehend it. Now the flow of time, if we see, it is actually calibrated. And this is what we call as laya. Now, if this calibration happens to be small, we get a sense of feeling as if the time is, quick. And if large, we feel as if it is this time passing by is slow. And that is what we call as the vilamba. When it is neither too large nor too small, we say that it is in the madhyalaya. Another aspect of rhythm that we see here is that it is both accented and the unaccented beats together is what makes for the rhythm. And it is the unaccented beats that give character to the rhythm and makes differentiations in various types of the rhythm. So the unaccented beats are actually very, very important in the concept of the rhythm here. And a series of accents with lack of stresses would present what we call as some kind of a monotonous pounding. And this is, of course, of no rhythmic significance to us. For rhythmic variations to happen, both the accented and the unaccented beats, essentially they have to come together. And as for the tempo of the composition, we see that the concept in Indian classical music is very different when you compare to the Western music. In Indian classical music, we see that the tempo is never marked by the composer, because of the fact that most often we learn the compositions through oral tradition, and also earlier when we see the compositions of Tyagaraja, Dikshadhar and all, we see that it was never the composer who sat and notated his composition. It was his people coming in the Shishya Parampara or somebody else who actually notated it later. So the composer actually never put any kind of what we call as a tempo for singing any particular composition. So then how do we actually determine what is the tempo or the layam in which a composition should be rendered? The factors governing here are, of course, the rasa and the bhava of the ragam, and of course also the sahitya content. For example, if it's a very kind of a vibrant kind of a ragam, then automatically we see that the tempo of the layam of the composition is also in a fast tempo. Sometimes a ragam like say Neelambari or some other ragam which is basically has got a slower movement. These kind of ragams, the composition are rendered in Vilamba Kala. And also the Sahitya, depending on what is the meaning conveyed by the Sahityam, based on that also we determine the tempo. So there are various factors here. Now, if you look at Western music, it's a quite different concept where you see that the tempo of the composition is given by the composer himself through symbols or indication. So, where every composition, when it is being rendered by the musician, the performing musician, he already has a fixed tempo as given by the composer and he has to strictly adhere to that. In Indian music, as I mentioned earlier, also, this concept of strict adherence to tempo is not there. So, also, we could see that how a particular composition may have been rendered by a stalwart in a fast tempo, and the same composition in a relative slow tempo by some other musician. So, this concept of even what we call as the Vilamba, Madhya, and Druta is actually a very relative thing. And it is only through intuition that we develop these concepts. And we do not have any kind of what I said earlier, like rigid kind of a tempo that we see in Western music that is not there here. But nevertheless, we do have what we call as the concept of the Vilamba, Madhya, and the Druta Layam.
CM 365, all about Carnatic music.